Hi, welcome to That's Jacqueline. I'm Jacqueline, and I'm here with Marissa Marquez, educator and mother of three. We are talking about the second episode in our education Cradle to Grave pre-K. So we split up pre-K into three spots because we think it's so important that the first 5 years of life are so important to a child's development and to really setting them up for success in life. So we're going to be talking about some of the problems that might get in the way of a good pre-K experience, and some of the things that maybe we could do about them as parents and as teachers. The next episode, we're going to talk more about, like, as a community, what things we'd like to see, whether government programs and policies. But in this one, we're going to really talk about just kind of like what hindrances we faced. We touched a little bit on those in the last episode, but I thought we'd kind of go a little bit more into some of those problems. So one of the things that we didn't talk about on the last episode are some of the things that maybe parents don't expect. So maybe if your child has a disability or an emotional issue or a mental health issue, or if there are some of those problems, maybe not in the child, but maybe at home, and how those can get in the way of a pre-K program working well. So maybe you can kind of talk about that. I know you and I have kind of touched on it a little bit, but what kind of problems have you seen with that concern in schools?
One of the things, I know you and I talked about a couple of things, and I hadn't mentioned this before, but this is actually really important. There's a certain amount of time for kids who have any type of physical disabilities, kids who have mental or emotional disabilities. For them, it's a 504 program, basically, that most of them will qualify for. And they're only allowed a certain amount of time to be out of school. That time is not sufficient because they still have to go to doctor's appointments. They have to go to counseling appointments sometimes. And that gets in the way of the learning process itself. Homebound schooling is available through the districts, through the government. However, homebound is basically used
for critical children, right?
For critical children, for children who are dying, who are terminal usually.
So that's one of the things that I noticed.
But we still need to have a different program, I think, for these other students, because what ends up happening is they end up having to go to homeschooling, which then isolates them even further.
Yeah, and it cuts them off. So here's the funny thing that I don't think a lot of people understand. When a child has a mental or physical disability or an emotional issue that is getting in the way of their education, that does not equal to a cognizant issue. So a child who may be acting out in school, and that acting out could be anything. It may not even be an issue with the child. It may be an issue with the home.
Exactly.
But it could be anything. A child who's not eating at home sometimes, will obviously come and I'm cranky when I'm not fed, so
Right.
may come to school, having issues there. A child whose parents are going through divorce, a child who has one parent who is terminally ill. There's so many things that can affect a child. Just because a child is acting out in school, or just because a child has a physical disability like dyslexia, or I guess that's not a physical, but it's a mental disability.
Or learning disability.
Yeah, any kind of disability, whether it's, or if it's a physical thing, does not mean that child is not ready to learn, that child doesn't want to learn, and that child isn't capable of learning at the same level as other children. What it means is that the need of that child needs to be looked at differently, and they need to make sure that while they are addressing every single one of those needs, they are also addressing the needs of their education at the same time, that they're not just focusing in on this disability or this mental health issue or this behavioral problem, that they're still, I think that kind of ends up taking over the whole conversation with a child that age. And they stop worrying about educating them. And then the child gets behind, and you have a child who already maybe feels, who already has a low self-esteem, who doesn't understand their own emotions. They don't maybe understand their own health issues. They don't know why they're having the health issues or the disabilities. They don't understand at all. They're not old enough to comprehend what's happening to them. And so you have a child who's already suffering, who you are now adding to that by taking away their education. Children come out wanting to learn. They come out excited to learn. They, from the second they breathe, that's all they do. They absorb information and they look for sources of education. When you don't give them to them, they will go through your cabinets and they will find something to learn from. So when you take away a child's ability to learn, you're cutting them off at the feet and you're taking away who they are, who they naturally are. And that's just going to exacerbate any issue, that other issues that they may have. So I think it's really important that we address those things, and that we and we can talk about this a little bit more in the next episode. But I think it's really important that we address that children who have a special need, whatever that special need is, have a right to care and to an education just as much as any other child. And
And
that
it doesn't matter what age it could. And that's the other thing, is that for pre-K, and I mean pre-K, even 3-year-olds, people that children that would be in a Mother's Day Out program, even, or if we had a Head Start program, those children deserve even more care, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? And if it costs the community more to make that happen, I don't have a problem with that. I have been both on the low end income, you know, way low, and I've been on the extremely high income. And in every case, I can tell you that I think that I would say, let's pay for those children to have the education they need. I do not want my child looking at another child and having to see another child being put off to the side just so that it creates more financial stability in the education system. I want my child growing up learning that every child, regardless of the problems that they may have, whatever those problems are, that they have a right to education and that they are considered equal, and that we will problem solve. And if sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it's a process learning how to solve these solutions. I feel for the schools because they're having to meet so many different needs, and that's a lot. I mean, meeting one child's need is hard. Meeting thousands of children's needs is just unthinkable. Yes. And I've been on the board of several schools, and so I know how that works. But I do still feel strongly and passionately about every child having a right to learn. So you bring up an excellent point, with how they're treated. They're thrown to a homeschool program. They're not allowed to socialize. They're secluded from other children. They're made to feel bad or not as smart as other children. And I just think that's the wrong way to do it. And I think we do a disservice to our other children, having them grow up, see that happen too, having seen that, little Tommy had a little bit of a behavioral problem. And now we just sent him away because, he was broken. So we sent him away. And I don't think
that teaches them to, in turn, as they grow older, when they get older, to do the same thing. When I first taught, I didn't know how to be a teacher. I was an English major that jumped into a teaching situation, and I had to think about, my teachers and how they taught.
And how you take care of it. So we're running short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and shut off our episode. But I want to thank everybody for coming out, and we're going to be including kind of going on with this conversation in episode 3. We're going to talk about some of the things that a community and the government can do to make sure that everybody gets their education and kind of solve some of these problems and some of the suggestions that we have. I thank you for coming out. Again, we'll have in the description, we will have links to articles and books that we think that are good, and also like kind of a summary of some of the problems that we see and maybe anything we didn't touch on here today. So check out my blog, that's Jacqueline.com. There'll be a new submission every couple weeks, or I'm sorry, every couple days, talking about these specific issues, and kind of, like I said, cradle to grave. We're going to go all the way up, to into the higher education. So please check up on that for updates, and I will see you back next time, Larissa. Thank you.